if you would be anorectic back in the days, you would be told by the whole society that this was wrong, that you have to eat. This is dangerous. But if you now have a similar type of rejection of the female body form, of developing breasts, of having your period, and protesting against that by instead wanting to be a male, you get another reaction from society. They will tell you, this is good, be who you are, go ahead with it.
Yeah.
Don't listen to the transphobes who just want you to you see? So there's really nobody to say, hey, hold on, wait a while, is this really what you want?
Hi everyone, welcome to Mind the Shift. I am Anders Bolling. There is a shift going on in our perception of sex and gender. Equality has increased in many ways, in many areas, and the relevance of the sex has decreased in many areas too, which is undoubtedly welcome. But it seems as if the discussion about gender intensifies as equality increases. Perhaps it is because when the border between the sexes gets blurred, some feel afraid that something goes missing. To some, it might feel desperately important to pinpoint exactly what it is that separates men from women. One specific development is a shift from emphasizing biological gender or sex to emphasizing psychological gender. That is, you are the gender that you feel you are, no matter what you have between your legs. Now, should young boys and young girls who feel they have been born into the wrong kind of body be allowed to go through advanced surgery to physically correct their biological sex? This is a change that my guest today has thought a lot about, and a question that she has thought a lot about and criticizes. In her book, On the Existence of Gender, which is a translation from the Swedish title, Kajsa Ekis Ekman thoroughly dissects what's happening and reveals how fast things are changing, and that this shift has some pretty unexpected and unwelcome ramifications. Welcome to the show, Kajsa.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for this introduction.
Yeah, we're going to dive into this book and talk more about your work. Also, hopefully, during our conversation. First, I can ask first, how has the book been received so far?
Oh, I think there's been a lot of debate because, it's the first book here in Sweden that deals with the issue from the feminist standpoint, or to actually even talk about, this new definition of sex. Abroad, there have been a couple of books, but I think here the debate is just starting.
So have you been criticized yourself? I mean, you criticized this thing that's happening, but have you been criticized harshly from the
I reckon so.
transgender community, for instance?
Well, I mean, the Swedish church has been criticizing me. Who else? The National Organization for LGBTQ Rights has even published a book about my book, or like a leaflet type of thing. There's been a lot of articles, but that was kind of expected because I think this is one of the most sensitive issues of our times. It's
really fascinating. When I read the book, I had so many aha moments. But first, maybe there's some confusion around some central concepts here, I think. So can you please, just for the audience, listeners, explain the difference between sex and gender, if that's possible?
Yes. Well, sex refers to basically biology, like the material sex that you have. Chromosomes. Like women are, females basically that are born with 2 X chromosomes, and males are born with XY. And then of course you have a minority of people that are born intersex, that might have some features of the other sex, but generally you can say that the human species is divided into 2 sexes, right? And then gender is a word that the women's movement started using in the 60s, 70s, referring to stereotypes, conceptions, like everything that they denoted a social construct. So, for example, the idea that males are supposed to fight in war, that females are supposed to take care of children, that men are supposed to have short hair and females long hair, and all these things that vary in history and in culture, all that you can say it's arbitrary, like we're not born with it. You are not born to have short hair. I'm not born to have long hair. It's just the way that culture decides how to divide males and females up and create this kind of role around sex. And feminists have called that gender to separate it from biological sex.
Yeah.
So I think gender is a useful concept. Simone de Beauvoir, in her study The Second Sex, back then she wasn't using that word gender because it wasn't really invented back then.
In the 50s?
Yeah, 49 I think she wrote it. So it wasn't really invented back then, but basically it denotes everything that she is analyzing there.
Yeah.
Everything that society imposes on men and women is gender. And gender is what most feminists want to do away with.
Mm-hmm.
We want a world where sex is just your biological body and nothing else. Nothing will restrain you from being what you want to be, who you want to be, how you're supposed to behave or dress or anything.
Yeah. So with that definition, I guess that gender is malleable, and sex is fixed.
Basically, yeah. It's very interesting.
And then there are some aspects of that which we'll come back to, because some people think that sex isn't even sex isn't fixed.
Yeah.
So yeah, but thank you for the explanation. That's good, excellent. Because I'm probably gonna mix the two up when I talk today. But
today there is a real mix-up. It's funny because when I was reading up on the history of why the word gender became so popular, today in the U.S., people say gender when they actually mean sex, like gender discrimination when they actually talk about sex discrimination. But
maybe in English it's because it can be confused with sex.
Exactly.
Having sex, sexual intercourse. In other languages, it's not that confusing.
Exactly. And the thing was that a lot of women activists back in the 70s, 80s, 90s were advised not to use the word sex, because when they were speaking to a whole male audience, or speaking within the court of law or something and using the word sex, everyone's just going to think of having sex. So it's better to use the word gender. It sounds more scientific, and it takes, the thoughts away from that.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, so now this change that's going on here in the perception of what gender or sex is or should be has been, as I understand, pretty fast. And and it also involves some, at least in this country and in many other countries, as you write in the book, legal changes that will have big implications. Can you explain what is going on here?
Well, there are several things, because first of all, what is happening here? What is happening is that all of a sudden, as opposed to the description I just gave you, which is, sex is just there and gender is a social construct. Now, this new definition of sex and gender that's taking hold says that basically you switch these two around. So you say that, no, your gender is who you are. It's what you're born with. It's like an innate feeling that emanates from the human being. So you just have to find out what gender you are, So basically, as opposed to you're born with your body, but the rest is a social construct, now we have you're born with an innate feeling of gender. Whereas sex is done away with entirely. That basically shouldn't be used, shouldn't exist. Mm-hmm. And you see that, for example, in a lot of ways that, for example, in the medical profession, midwives and things like that are being told all over the Western world that they have to take away the word woman to refer to pregnant people. Because not only women get pregnant, they say, right? So then what do they mean when they say not only women get pregnant? Because apparently only females get pregnant. So then they've changed the meaning of the word woman as to mean those who identify with a female gender.
And the body is irrelevant.
Exactly. The body is irrelevant. So even though you can get pregnant, you are giving birth, you are not a woman unless you identify as such. And my question then would be, well, how do you know what you identify with when you identify as a woman? What is that thing, right? And we then get back to stereotypes about what a woman is. I identify as a woman because of what? Well, generally then, if you look at definitions or explanations, you find that the identification is with the female gender, the stereotype, which is what we wanted to do away with. So we get back to gender and gender roles and stereotypes as being the basis for defining sex. So it's a total backlash.
They say sex is in the brain more than in the rest of the body.
Yeah, some say that, you just...
Or gender is in the brain.
Yeah, that you just know who you are, and some say that, it's in the brain, so you're born with it. Whereas I was going through actual studies on, does the brain have a gender? And it doesn't. You can't denote what is a female brain and a male brain. I mean, there are tendencies, but they're so overlapping. Whereas when it comes to sex, it's not overlapping. Like, no male-born person can have children. And no female person can produce sperm. It's not overlapping.
That's true. So what are the legal changes that are going on here and happening fast and people don't even know about?
Yeah, well, basically, what's being done in country after country is a change in the law that allows for self-definition of sex, meaning that anybody who feels like a certain gender can go and change the way they're registered in the law. And some countries are even speaking about taking away sex in registers. So you wouldn't be registered as any sex at all, right? And that, of course, has, as you were saying, ramifications for the women's movement especially, and that's what I'm worried about, because in Sweden, for example, we have I think some of the world's best statistics, like sex-based statistics, because when we're born, we get a personal identification number that says what sex you are. And on the basis of that, you can make studies that, the official Statistics Bureau does every second year on the pay gap between men and women, discrimination in the working place, violence, lifespan, criminality, all sorts of things. So if you take that away, it's going to be really difficult to assess our situation and to change it.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, as you say, I mean, this has interesting implications for gender equality. And I mean, at first, this may, if you don't look into it very deeply, as you have done in the book, it may seem as a natural next step in society's endeavor to, achieve full equality towards equality. But you discovered here that it is actually, it entails a setback for gender equality, or a backlash, to use Susan Faludi's term. And you say it is as if the biologism that a large chunk of feminism wanted to get rid of is back, but now in the form of some kind of inner biologism.
Yeah, I call it like biologism without biology.
Yeah.
So basically, we get back to, a woman is, and I've gone through like a lot of these books that are, for example, self-help books or guidebooks for parents of transgender kids, for example, and how they speak about sex and gender. Like, how do they explain what it is? And often you get back to, you have, for example, this spectrum. I mean, it's very common now to say, gender is a spectrum. We all have our unique identity. Now, if you look at it, it turns out it's not that unique at all, because you have from 1 to 10, and 1 is a Barbie doll, and 10 is G.I. Joe action figure. So you have to place yourself on the spectrum. And, this is all about stereotypes. It has nothing to do with a body. It's basically, if you feel that you are a Barbie doll, you are Supergirl, and if you feel you want to be combating in war, you are G.I. Joe, you are a male. And basically, it just goes against everything that we want to get rid of. Okay, why, if it has nothing to do with sex, if this identity is totally irrelevant to the body, why even call it a gender identity? Why can't you just call it personality? Why connect it to male and female?
Yeah.
If you see what I mean.
Yeah.
If you want to be Barbie, you can be Barbie, even though, you're a girl or a boy.
Yeah.
Why do you have to connect it to that? And why do you then? Because often in these guidebooks, and most of them are American guidebooks, it says that if your son or daughter at the age of 3 start acting more like the other sex, like, for example, your son is starting to wear pink, he wants glittery clothes, he wants to even wear dresses, God forbid, and now he also hangs out with girls. Most likely he is a girl. And they advise you then to take him to a psychologist. And later on in life, he's going to be subjected to something which is very controversial, a treatment that they now stopped in Sweden and Britain, which is called the Dutch protocol, which is you start before puberty or when puberty has just begun with puberty blockers, which actually stops the body from developing. And then you follow up with cross-sex hormones. And then you do full surgery at the age of 18. So I see this as a major backlash, because what is happening is, I mean, if you take it to the extreme, what's happening is that kids who are what they call gender non-conforming, that don't fit into the stereotype, are supposed to be medically treated.
Yeah. They're not allowed to be, I mean, boys who are girlish, so to speak, are not allowed to be that, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And what does that mean for our view, or these people's view, on homosexuality?
Well, I think it's very interesting because, we're told that this whole new definition of sex goes in line with like gay pride and goes in line with tolerance, and this transgender are just the next group in line to fight for their rights. And it fits into that narrative. So you're told, like, this is the rainbow flag. It's part of that. But if you look at what's actually happening, you see something that's just the opposite, which is that if you look at a lot of children who are being taken to these clinics, I mean, they're being taken to these clinics even before they can make their own choice about things, because they're very often really small, and they're definitely under the age of 18. So what's the reason for taking them there? Well, often it is what you call gender incongruent behavior.
Well, I guess there's a catch-22 here, because, I mean, the general idea to have surgery and give them hormone treatment when they're very young is that you have to stop puberty for this physiological change of the sex to be possible to achieve, isn't it?
Yeah. So, basically, I mean, endocrinologists, I think you call it, we're experimenting with this. And why do they call it the Dutch protocol? Because they came from Holland, and they realized that it's much easier to create resemblance to a woman if you start before a guy has entered puberty. I mean, when he develops hair on his chest, when he gets an Adam's apple, when he grows, he gets muscles, and all that happens afterwards, it's going to be difficult to create of him something that looks like a woman. But if you start before, he doesn't even enter puberty, well, he's going to pass, as they call it, like you pass as a woman, which then would enhance life quality. Now, I think the problem with that is that now when you have such an increase in a lot of Western countries, like you have up to 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, in some age groups, 8,000% increase in especially young girls that go to these clinics and that want to be converted into boys or men. It
used to be the other way around, didn't it?
Yeah, it used
more
to be.
More men wanted to become women.
Yeah, and it was older men too. I mean, it was basically, you would have one here and there that maybe thought about it their whole lives and really realized that this is what I want to do, and the process was extremely slow.
Think it through,
Yeah, and you had to have something called real life experience, which is before you did anything to your body, you had to go around and present as a woman for 2 years to know, is this really what you want? And I mean, now you have this procedure that you call affirmative, which is that you don't question somebody's gender identity. So if you come there when you were like 12, 13, 14, and you say, no, I'm a boy, I mean, they don't go into the history of that person like, did you have other problems? Could there be other reasons? And they just affirm that, okay, you are a boy. And they would put you on puberty blockers and then hormones. And I mean, there are so many ethical issues with that. And I think that's why they've stopped it now in Sweden and Britain. I mean, they realized that this is a very controversial treatment. It has side effects such as infertility, because when you never enter puberty, I mean, and then you put on cross-sex hormone, sometimes you can't even get fertility back after that.
So you kind of condemn these children to never being able to have children.
Basically, and I mean, some of these doctors are very like invasive in the way they speak to parents. They say you can either not have grandchildren or you cannot even have a child anymore because your child is going to take his or her life, because this is such a huge torment to them not being able to live as their gender. So they're really stressing parents here to agree to those treatments. And I think basically when you are 12, 13, 14, you don't have the maturity either in the brain or in terms of life experience to know really what it means that you are just choosing a path of life that you might regret later on, and then it's going to be too late. So, in my book, I don't even speak about treatments for adults because I think, that's every person's choice, and really I have nothing to do with that. If somebody wants to have breasts, if you're a man or a woman, I mean, okay, who am I to say anything about that? But I think when it comes to children, and especially such an increase, we have to try to look at, are there other factors that might be involved
Which are
here?
they? What do you think it depends on?
I think there are a lot of factors at play here. I mean, when I looked into testimonies of these young girls that want to become guys and looked at, how they spoke about it. I mean, first of all, there's a prevalence of other psychological problems in their history, and especially anorexia was very prevalent, and also other type of complex issues such as ADHD and things like that.
Yeah, I've heard the autism spectrum.
Exactly.
Represented.
Very, very much more so than in the general population of girls that age. Other problems as well. A lot of these girls, when they talked about it, it wasn't so much about wanting to be a man. The way they spoke about it was more not wanting to be a woman, not wanting to fit into the stereotype of being a woman. And if you look at young girls today, I mean, they're brought up in a society that's very different from, just 20 years ago when I was growing up, which is that it's extremely segregated when it comes to gender roles, and it's very sexualized. And also with the onset of the internet, if you don't fit into what a girl is supposed to be like, it can be very difficult to grow up. And so these were some of the factors that I saw. And then you had another factor, which is that I think, a girl growing up, like when I was young, she wouldn't even have heard about this. So it wouldn't be an option. But now it's all over the place. So if you feel a bit different and you just Google, whatever, you will meet lots of YouTube videos, posts, communities that speak about you are transgender. If you think you are transgender, you probably are. So there's the trend factor as well.
There's a bias. They get confirmation wherever they look.
Yeah.
It's the algorithms that do that.
Yeah, I guess. And also that, if you would be anorectic back in the days, you would be told by the whole society that this was wrong, that you have to eat. This is dangerous. But if you now have a similar type of rejection of the female body form, of developing breasts, of having your period, and protesting against that by instead wanting to be a male, you get another reaction from society. They will tell you, this is good, be who you are, go ahead with it. Yeah. Don't listen to the transphobes who just want you to you see? So there's really nobody to say, hey, hold on, wait a while, is this really what you want?
Well, in a way that contradicts what you said about this society being very, very polarized between the sexes, and because, I mean, that would never happen before. I mean, they would of course reject the idea that this girl was actually a boy, but now they say, but it's a paradox.
Well, I would say it's actually, it can be explained, because if you look at societies that have practiced either transition, like medical transition for a long time, like Iran, which has a history of doing that, and Thailand, for example, or social transition, which has been around in Afghanistan, Albania, and places like that, you see that very often these are societies that have strict gender roles. And of course, the stricter gender roles you have, the more visible and noticeable a person's going to be that doesn't fit in. So if you don't fit in, I mean, then society has kind of institutionalized an exception, which is you can just switch over to the other side. You can be that instead, right? So if being a young girl today is being extremely sexualized, being very into makeup, TikTok, if you look at what's going on there, TikTok videos, and then if you just feel like, I don't fit in here, that's not me. I'm not interested in makeup. I want to play soccer. I don't care about all that stuff. There is the option. You can just go over to the man's side. You can be that. But it's very difficult for young girls to say, I'm still a girl, but I'm just this kind of girl.
Yeah, and I'm not homosexual. But they might not know that, because, I mean, in your book you reason that, or you come to the conclusion that many of these, if you look at the studies, these kids that weren't subject to hormone treatment, that were told to wait for a few years, turned out that a large proportion of those actually were homosexual.
Yes, exactly.
Lesbian or gay.
Yeah.
When they turned 18 or 17, they realized that they were that.
Yeah.
So that was the thing.
Yeah, and in those guidebooks, the American guidebooks for parents of transgender children, I think it's especially harmful because, if you're a parent and your daughter comes home and says, I'm not a girl anymore, I'm a guy, and you think, oh my God, what is happening? And you start researching, you would find these books. And it says, oh, maybe your daughter has been thinking that she's a lesbian, or your son is thinking that he's gay. But actually the inner mismatch is not about sexuality, it's about gender. So they're telling these parents that, no, you don't have a gay son. He's actually a heterosexual daughter.
Yeah,
so
that's a strange switch.
Yeah, so that's why I think this new narrative fits in both into like the super modern people, super postmodern people who just want to be like at the forefront of everything, like the avant-garde of it all, like the super liberal, even left-wing feminist parents who are like, we embrace all this. But it also fits into very conservative parents who cannot accept the fact that they have a gay son.
Yeah.
And if they understand, no, it's just a medical condition. He was just born in a like male body, but he's actually a girl. Okay, we understand. So if you hear a lot of these testimonies from parents, they say, oh, our son just wanted to wear dresses and he was not allowed to. And there was fights over it all the time. And he just always wanted to play with girls and he was not allowed to. But then we understood he has this condition. He has gender dysphoria. And then they change his name to a girl's name. All of a sudden, he's allowed to wear dresses. So you wonder about these parents' mindset. Like, why was he not allowed to wear dresses before as a boy?
As if that were radical. I mean...
And I think in Sweden especially, because in Sweden we have been very kind of open about this for a long time, whereas in the U.S. I think it has been more conservative. And then they're exporting that mindset here as well and all over. Now, I'm not saying that all parents of children who experience dysphoria are that intolerant. I'm just reading from the books on the subject.
Yeah, because you're accused of being transphobic, of course, since you're questioning this whole narrative. I mean, the totality of it. Yeah. But you're not rejecting the fact that there are some people some children probably who actually feel and will feel when they also become adults that they are born in the wrong bodies, so to speak. But I mean, the proportion of them is not very, very high. And is that one of your main criticisms,
I
that
guess
it's too small amount of?
I guess I wouldn't really agree to the notion the wrong body.
Well, in their
I agree to the notion that there are people who feel uncomfortable with, I don't know if it's the body or it's the ideal, the gender or the sex, and that feel better after transition. That, of course, it's so. I mean, it has to be so in a society that's so divided and that tells girls you have to be this way, tells boys you have to be that way, and then if you just feel better the other way, and you transition and you have a successful transition and you feel better in your new role, I mean, yeah, of course it's going to be that way. It's the same way, like a person feels, oh, I'm ugly. Right. You go do sports, you lose, 50 kilos and all of a sudden you feel better. Of course that's the case. But I do wonder about society's readiness to accept terms like the wrong body. Yeah. Like, really, if you think about it, like, take it easy. Like, don't stress. Like, what does it mean, really? You know?
It's the body that you've gotten, but you might feel uncomfortable in that sex, maybe, and you're born with a male body, and you just feel very, very strong that you wanna be able to have, to carry a baby, but
that won't work anyway. Yeah, that won't work anyway. I mean,
there is one case on the internet going around, an Asian guy who is, or maybe he was born as a woman.
Yeah, that's the thing. No, there's never been a male person that's given birth. There's never been a uterus transplant to a guy.
That was wrong. Yeah.
So
True.
that's never happened. There's never been a person born male in the whole history of humankind that's had a child. So
You're
that
probably
unfortunately
right.
won't work. But I mean, I just think it's just beyond the scope of my book to even get into what people want to do. I mean, yeah, like if you want to do it, do it when you're old enough.
Yeah.
Fine. I have no issue with that. And I don't even think I have the right to have opinions about it. But what I do is I analyze concepts that are going around in society that like, oh, you're just born in the wrong. Wait. I just want us to, take a step back and just look at these terms.
Yeah.
Like, what do they mean? What are the consequences? What is the ideological backdrop to this?
But it's not a big enough a problem for it to have these kinds of legal consequences that are supposedly happening now.
Yeah, well, basically, one thing that I think is very strange about this is that it always comes back to the transgender debate. But actually, the whole shift in the definitions of sex actually has very, very little to do with those few people who actually are transgender. Like, the consequences are so much bigger for everyone, basically. So what I talk about is, for example, erasure of females, the word female, that's not supposed to be used anymore. Erasure of female sports, for example, in terms of prisons, in terms of a lot of areas where you, for good reasons, are talking about male and female, like in statistics, for example. And all of a sudden we're told that no, this is not going to exist anymore. And I don't think this has to do with transgender. Like, it has to do with transgender being used as like an explanation to basically change the whole narrative around women and men.
But why? Why is that being done? What's the general idea? That because I was going to ask about exactly this. You write in the book that the word female, as you say, and the word woman is being omitted, but not the word man.
Yeah.
That which is, I mean, why? I mean, men are supposedly still a sex, or they exist.
The same way that we are. but yeah, that's the weird thing. Like, for example, I analyze, for example, the companies that sell sanitary products to women, like, for example, Tampax, Libresse, and all these companies that Always, for example, that sell pads and tampons. And many of them have now stopped using the word woman. Basically you say, why? Like, you are selling products to women. No, they say, we want to celebrate the diversity of all people who menstruate. So we're now going to stop taking away the sign for woman and take away the word woman. And then in a very telling paragraph, they write, let's celebrate all people who menstruate. We can do anything that men can do while bleeding. And you say, wait, you have the word men.
Yeah.
You're not taking that away. You're still using it as the opposite of something else that cannot be said because that something else is now obliterated. So we're called people who menstruate.
Yeah, that's really something.
So you're lifting one taboo, and this is like very interesting from an anthropological perspective. Like, you lift one taboo, but in the same breath, you create another taboo. So you say, let's lift the taboo around menstruation. But then you create another taboo. So now we can talk about menstruation, but we can't talk about women.
Yeah.
And you have to remember that it's been a very short time since women were taboo. I mean, religiously and in so many cultures, in so many ways. It's been just a second since we were allowed to compete in the Olympics. It's been a second since we were allowed to do all the things that men do. So basically, we just, all of a sudden we're told, for example, in sports, we were told for, hundreds of years that we couldn't, do sports because we didn't have the right body to do sports. And now we're told that, no, there is no such thing as female sports. Okay. So it's really difficult for me not to see the workings here of, a system called patriarchy in which it's really easy to always cut down on women's rights.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they sit in a room with cigars and go, haha, let's use this transgender thing to just stop all these women from. I'm not saying it's like that, but I'm just saying that I find the ease with which female rights are being taken away kind of telling.
And it's women that's at the forefront in doing this.
Yeah.
And the conservative men can just relax and lean back
They can just
and
say,
watch
look at all the lunacy that's going on.
watch it happening, you know. And
Yeah.
this works for us. Do you know if the same? You were mentioning this thing about pads and tampons there, that they take away the female symbol and don't write the word women on the packages there. Do you know if the same thing is happening with shaving gear? Men's shaving gear?
Have not heard that. You know,
I haven't thought about it.
I haven't heard like men's spaces being questioned at all the same way. Like, you know, if they were to do with men's sports what they do to women's sports now, I think this is a very good example, because sports, I mean, you can say you have a gender in your brain, whatever, but sorry, when it comes to sports, it's really about the body here.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, I mean, there is a reason why we have different categories. Like, women just wouldn't be able to compete with men in basically anything that's not chess or horseback riding, you know, when it comes to using the body. So what you have here is now the International Olympic Committee changed the rules so that anybody who has identified as a woman for 2 years and has lowered his testosterone level to 10 nanomoles per liter can compete in the women's section. Now, the general level of males is 30 nanomoles per liter, whereas the general level of females, I read, is 2. So it means he's still way above us. Not speaking of the fact that he has developed as a man, he has competed as a man before, he has a skeleton, he has the muscles that he might have had before from having testosterone when he was a teenager.
Yeah.
So it still gives him an advantage. And now, I mean, we're just told like, oh, this is diversity. Like, why do you care? You know, it's not so many. Like, you know, she's like a great role model here. And we're seeing women's world records being beaten in a number of sports here, like weightlifting. That was later on taken away. But then we have also biking, for example, where world record has been broken by a former man. Yeah. So I'm wondering, like, say they were to do the same thing with men's sports, to say, no, now let's make way for the trans men, the former women who want to come in. Now, we need to make space for them because otherwise, you know, they wouldn't have a chance. Mm-hmm. So let's make a rule that, like, in any soccer team, we need at least one trans man, for example. Let's make sure that the trans men, when it comes to running, can start 2 seconds before all the other men so they can compete on equal terms. I mean, there'd be an outcry. All the men would say, what is this ridiculous, stupid idea? Yeah. Like, come on, man, this is serious. This is sports. But when it comes to us, it's like, oh, you know, just be tolerant and accepting. So I think what we have here at play is like the creation of 2 categories. One category for males, which is constructed as kind of closed and just hegemonic, right? It's just males and nobody can come in. And then we have the creation of the other category, which is basically non-men. So like basically a trash category for anybody that doesn't classify as a man. So like females, trans women, trans men, homosexuals, non-men, non-binary should all go in that category, right? And you see it like in sports, you see it in prisons, where trans women are applying to get into women's prisons, but you don't see trans men applying to get into men's prisons for obvious reasons. Who wants to be there?
No.
Even the men don't want to be there.
No, they will get hurt and hit and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, you mentioned talking about the female category being the so to speak trash category. There's a public toilet in the parliament in Barcelona, I think.
Yeah.
And there is one door where it's the male symbol, and then there's one door where all the other symbols are. Yeah,
it's all the other symbols.
Yeah.
And it's like that explains it exactly, that, you know, we're not talking about, you know, the category of males having to be inclusive.
No.
We're talking about the category of females having to be inclusive all the time. Feminism has to be inclusive. But why is that question never posed to patriarchy? I mean, how come all the transgender people that were elected to parliaments all over the world were trans women, meaning former men? We haven't seen a single trans man being elected to office. So are we really seeing, you know, diversity here, or is it just shuffling of the same old cards?
Yeah, it looks like it when you read your book.
Yeah.
There were so many aha moments, as I mentioned. This thing with sports is one, and many others. And how do you think it all started, and why? Because, I mean, this is a thing of the last 20 years or so, not more than that.
Even less. I mean, it's basically since like 2014 it's been.
Is it just an internet thing that young girls who didn't feel comfortable in their bodies started reading things on the internet? Or is it something, did it start in the transgender community and they were so successful in lobbying or?
Well, you know what I don't understand is that, for example, the number of transgender people is so small. I mean, it's smaller than like the Roma community in Sweden. And I mean, the Roma community hasn't had a single change of law made for them. And I mean, for the fact that, for example, an inquiry, an official inquiry from the Swedish state can propose such a thing as take away sex in our passports entirely, for example. Do away with the whole Swedish equality policy, which is based on counting how many women, how many men, which would then be made impossible because who knows what a woman is.
Yeah.
So how can such a small minority warrant such a big change? I don't really
squander 50 years of gender equality work.
Yeah, I don't really think that it. I don't really think that it really has to do with this group at all. Actually, okay. I think it's a kind of.
You have a conspiracy theory?
I don't actually know how it could happen. I guess one of the reasons is that anybody who says something against is being labeled as transphobic. Like you heard what happened to like J.K. Rowling.
Yeah.
And any woman who speaks out is shut down. I mean, violently. She's boycotted. She's trashed online. She's canceled. She's vilified. She loses friends. She loses contracts. And I mean, that's a very efficient strategy. Because if somebody like from the ultra-right proposed like, oh, let's just stop counting men and women. Let's stop with equality policy, like totally. And then, of course, we would all say, no, what are you talking about? And they wouldn't really have anything to say. But now when it's done this way, I mean...
And they're all for it.
Yeah, so basically then...
They don't have to say anything. They just can sit back.
They can just sit back. And when it's done this way, you have an efficient way of shutting down any woman who wants to defend her own rights because she's told she's transphobic. So you are not allowed to fight for your own sex without being told that you are actually fighting against your own sex, because the most oppressed members of your own sex are trans women. So you get into a kind of labyrinth that you can't get out of. And, you know, it makes it really difficult for the women's movement to formulate a policy that would be, you know, defending women's rights without risking also to alienate most of the female population. Because if we're going to use all these new words like cis women, you know, gender incongruence, privilege, and so on, you risk ending up in such an academic language that's so unintelligible that most working class normal women would just like be alienated from it.
Yeah, it's such a paradox, the whole thing.
Yeah,
it's really incredible.
Yeah, actually my book is a kind of start. Like I'm not really I haven't really found the formula yet. Like that's what everybody's asking, like how could this happen, like who's behind.
Yeah,
I haven't really found the formula. I mean, I just point out a lot of factors.
Well, I guess, I mean, society develops in strange ways sometimes, and you can't see until maybe 50 years later what actually happened. I mean, we still don't know exactly what happened before the world wars and whatever. So there are many theories still about as to what actually happened.
Or the moon landing.
Or the moon landing.
Twin Towers.
Yeah. It just happens, you know. Who knows why?
But I tend to look at, sometimes I look at like the, oh, sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it was just something stupid. Maybe it's the Matrix.
Yeah, well,
operating,
you know,
behind the scenes.
It's interesting because actually the two brothers who made Matrix are now women.
I know.
Did you know that?
Yeah. The Wachowski sisters.
Yeah. So, I mean, I tend to look at like development of narratives and political ideas and power as a kind of, it's like water, you know, it's like a river that flows. And if you block it in one place, it will find another way. And it's just going to flow until it finds a way to run down the mountain. You know what I mean? Like where it wants to go.
It's a good metaphor, I think.
Yeah. So I think you have to look at it more organically. Like if we in the women's movement have, with the building of our discourse, of our rhetoric, of our analysis, have efficiently blocked patriarchy from entering a certain way. Because you can no longer say what you said for 2,000 years, which is that females are inferior biologically, females are made for this and that. If a female will, jump too high, she will then develop a penis, so it's very dangerous, so women should just sit down and and you had all these bogus theories about women, and we've very efficiently blocked that. So you have patriarchy, I think, trying to find new ways, and then you have a small channel here that is totally irrelevant to that. It's just a transgender movement fighting for their own rights, completely legitimate, why not? It's good. But then you have patriarchy trying out that channel and kind of finding that's an efficient way. And if it works, the water is just going to flow. So it goes that way. That's the only way I can explain it.
Yeah, well, you're a materialist, of course, and you see things these ways. You see it politically and all that. But for me, there might be something else going on also, an insight in the mysteries of what gender is and feminine and masculine energies and things like that. But I want to know. Tell me.
No,
but I guess that's a different episode. But
I am really curious about this.
Yeah, we can talk about that sometime. But the reasons why this is happening, it doesn't have to be. Some kind of, as you say, patriarchy operating from the kitchen entrance, but it's so actually something real. But I'm not. I think your reasoning is extremely compelling in the book, and I agree with so many things that you say. But sometimes it's also to hold your horses. It might be, I don't know.
Yeah. So you think it has to do with some kind of polar shift in masculine and feminine energy, or?
That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that we can come to that question about categories. But first, you're a maverick journalist. You would say that, wouldn't you? A maverick journalist and writer, and you have written books, formerly published books about women's rights and also the financial crisis from a Greek perspective. And you are also a pronounced leftist. Right. And it's interesting here because to a large extent it's people on that particular political wing that endorse this new look on gender. So does that feel strange to you?
Yeah, I think, I'm really sad that we don't have the kind of Marxist foundation, the dialectical materialist foundation that we used to have in the left. So I'm sorry to say that the left, parts of it, not all of it, but parts of it have kind of lost their ideological foundation and is now drifting on the sea of postmodernism and kind of going where the wind takes them. And, it's sad to say because as I've been 20 plus something years in the feminist movement and the socialist movement, both as an activist and as a writer, and I'm shocked sometimes at where is the intellectual, ideological debate about the ideological and material foundations of our theories.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you'd get even from those...
Maybe they were wrong. Sorry.
You mean the Marxists?
Yeah, the theories. So that's why people
you'd
are
have
changing.
to read them to know, and most of these people haven't even read them. Most of these people are on the internet and just calling each other names.
Yeah.
Nowadays, if you read one book, you're considered an intellectual. You can't guess how many messages I've gotten from people that say, "Oh, you're such a transphobe." Okay, well, I just politely refer them to my book and say, "Have you read my book?" And if not, I advise you to read it and then come back if you have opinions afterwards. And they say, "No, I haven't read it and I won't read it either." Okay, so why are you talking to me? Sorry, I spent 4 years writing this, but why are you talking to me? No, I don't want to read it because I heard it so bad. You don't even trust your own judgment?
They're afraid to have to change their opinions. And it's also guilt by association, of course.
Yeah, but I just find it, I'm in shock.
Yeah.
Okay, you don't read all the books in the world, but you don't contact an author telling her you're not going to read her book.
Yeah.
What is my answer?
I would interview you today without having read your book, for instance. That would be so stupid.
There have been articles written about my book by people who self-proclaim they have not read the book and don't want to read it. And or they're like, no, I read somebody else who read it and they said it wasn't good. And I'm like, right,
Well,
but
there are always people like that. I mean,
but there's so many nowadays.
I've written books that people don't want to read either, so I don't know.
But then don't read it, but then don't talk about it.
Exactly.
Don't post about it.
Exactly.
And also, like, coming to me and demanding explanations, like, what do you think about this? Answer me now. I'm like, well, I wrote it in the book, so you can just go and read it. No, I want to answer now. Like, am I giving free lectures out here, like private lessons to each and every single person online? Like, I don't know. What happened to, like, respect for, the intellectual profession?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you have a very interesting and compelling chapter in the book about where you talk about other kinds of categories. You were mentioning this before here. And you make comparisons with gender. We're talking about these two categories where the female category is the trash category, and the male category is the fixed one that is still accepted, ironically. But you make comparisons with between gender and other categories in the book, like why not change ethnicity?
Yeah.
Why not change age? And
class.
why not change class? I mean, and to me that was why not? She's right, really. And then I thought, maybe there's something particular about gender, but the paradox is that probably you could argue that gender is the most fixed category, and the other ones are more malleable.
Yeah.
I mean, I can agree with that, but maybe all wouldn't agree with that.
Yeah, but I've never gotten I've posed this question many times. I've asked, what is it about sex that makes it possible to change, and not, for example, race, ethnicity, class, or age?
Yeah.
And I never get an answer. I never get an actual, thoughtful reflection on why not. Because if you think about it, like, class you can obviously change.
Well, you could argue that the class is also in your head. I mean, if you're a poor worker and you become rich, you're still a worker because you were born. I mean, some people would argue that.
Yeah. But I mean, obviously you can't.
Many leftists would argue that.
But you can go from one class to another, obviously. I mean, look at all the self-made people. So, But what you can't do is say, I'm poor, but I identify as rich, so therefore I am rich. So now you all have to give me money because I need, the lavish lifestyle that fits to my identity. I mean, that would just be laughed off. You can't do that. You can't say I am white, but I identify as black, or vice versa. And if you think about it, why not? Because ethnicity also is it's real, it exists, it's material, it's not made up, but it also consists of two parts. I mean, one part that is basically biological, it's, the color of your skin and so on. And then it's the whole social construct around what it means. So I guess without colonialism, without slavery, without, imperialism, we wouldn't think about race the way we do today, right?
Of course not.
I mean, there have been societies where race has been irrelevant, and there have been societies where you have hundreds of categories of races, like colonized Latin America, for example, where it was really specified who was allowed to have a little mat to sit on in church and who had to sit on the floor. And that was based on meticulous understanding of the color of your skin and what it meant. So, I mean, all that's also a social construct in a sense. So how come it's not socially allowed to identify as another race?
Yeah, I would argue that it's more social. That's more truly a social construct to say that you're part of a specific ethnic group than that you're part of a gender or a sex.
Yeah, because if you think about it, you can imagine a society without classes. You can imagine a society where ethnicity, race, obviously was there, but didn't play a part. It wasn't important.
Or that everyone just was mestizo. I mean, if
everybody mixed with everyone.
Yeah, mixed with everyone, so everyone's light brown in the end.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Or something. I mean, you can imagine that.
You can imagine that. And you can imagine just where it was just so irrelevant, like nobody really thought about it. But you can never imagine a society where it was irrelevant who gave birth. Because that's just such a life-changing thing. I mean, that's always going to matter somehow. It matters to sexuality because a man can technically have, 30. He can produce 30 children every day. We can produce one child a year. Our bodies change when we have children.
Or
Men's
twins.
Bodies don't change. Yeah, twins, of course. Or some have 8, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
And like a female cannot escape the consequences of sexuality the same way that a male can. Society can invent things such as the pill or such as, condoms or such as abortion that will, mitigate the effects of that gender divide, but it can never do away with it entirely. So that's always going to be a factor. And I think I came to the conclusion that, sex is what's most fixed. And therefore, that's why it's important now to patriarchy to do away with the notion of it. Because a racist society needs the notion of race. If you don't have the notion of race, you can't have racism, right? But you don't need the notion of sex and gender to have patriarchy, because it's just going to be there anyway. Do you see what I mean?
Well, not really, actually, but I mean...
Okay, let me put it another way. What I mean is this. I'm saying it in the last chapter that...
I'm just a bit confused.
Yeah, during 2,000 years, if you look in the archives of everything that's been written, and you look up the word woman, you will always find that, religious authorities, that scientists, the old Greeks, ancient Greeks, wrote about women in a very derogatory way. Oh, woman is just, not as good as men, basically, for 2,000 years. So the word woman was something that they defined.
It was actually non-man, really.
Yeah, even that. It was non-man. Like a man is a, perfect character and a woman is imperfect and so on.
Okay, I understand what you mean now.
So during the past 100, 200 years, women have started to take back that word. So we're now saying, no, you don't get to decide who we are. We are saying women is this, women is that, and we have filled the word woman with a new meaning a political subject that is oppressed, right? And that has the right to fight for her own rights. That's what woman basically means today. So patriarchy doesn't own that word anymore. So it can just do away with it. It can say, we don't need that word. Let's just stop using it. It's a tool that's no longer in their hands. So why can they do away with it and still maintain patriarchy? Because the basis of oppression is real. We will still keep on having children.
Yeah.
But if you make the analogy to, for example, a racist society that just did away with the word race, that just wouldn't talk about it, it would be more difficult to uphold racism because it is in the word. That's why, the racist wants to keep the N-word in his vocabulary. How would he otherwise be able to note the other person as other? Do you see what I mean?
Yeah,
whereas patriarchy doesn't need the word woman because it's fixed. That's my point. Yeah. I know it sounds a bit... I write it better in the book, so it's better explained there.
It makes sense. Yeah, you explained it well. Good. Well, you reason, of course, also in the book about, around the standpoints that exist, about the differences or non-differences between the sexes and what varieties of feminism that endorse one or the other side. The classical dichotomy is, of course, between biology and structure, that all is biology or all is social structure. Yeah. And you reason that both of these viewpoints in their extremes are not viable.
Yeah.
Or so. But isn't it obvious that both are true?
Of course, both exist.
Yeah.
Because, you look at biology, it's obviously there. It exists.
It's a scale.
It's not a scale. I would say more that it's... Okay, biology is always there. That's what all women in the world have in common, our biology, right? But my life is not the same as a woman born in Afghanistan or in China or in Peru or anywhere else for that matter, even in my own country, because of culture. So you can't just discard culture. Obviously, if I was... In some countries, I wouldn't even be born because there are so many abortions of, females before they're born. And they're not aborted because they identify as women. It's because they are.
Yeah.
So, of course, there you see both biology at play because what they're looking at is abortion of what is basically female biology. But you see the culture is what's aborting that child, not biology. So you see both factors. Yeah. And I think you need to take into account both factors to understand the world.
Yeah, but then the question of the biological aspect here is wider because then it's obvious that there's a difference in when it comes to the body and who can give birth to a child and all that. But is there anything else are there any other biological differences? You talked before about the brain. I think that scientists have found small, minor differences between female and men brain, but very small, as you say, and maybe they what do you call it?
Overlap.
Overlap.
That's the thing. There are tendencies, but they are overlapping. So as I was saying before, like when it comes to just reproductive functions, they're not overlapping at all. Like you can clearly say. But when it comes to brain, first of all, I noticed that one of the difficulties while studying brain is that you often study like dead people's brains, and then of course they're already conditioned by society. So if you look, for example, at a taxi driver in London, this famous study that like they have, because they've learned so many streets, there is a certain spot in their brain that's expanded, which is the ability to memorize, sense of orientation and things like that. So that's clearly not because they were born taxi drivers, but because they have, brain is a plastic organ, so
you would have to study newborn babies' brains.
Yeah, and you wouldn't just kill them and open the brains. You would have to do a brain scan, which is also problematic because it might, harm the child to do so. So, I mean, there are a lot of ethical issues. But anyway, I mean, there are tendencies, But then again, they are tendencies and they are not certainties.
But then again, if there are tendencies or if there even are differences, that doesn't mean that the one is better than the other, as you well know.
Of course.
So I mean, you can have matriarchy and you can have a patriarchy.
Yeah.
There are matriarchies in the world. Not very many, but I looked into it a couple of years ago. Actually,
there are still. I'm going, man. I'm
going. Yeah, you're going. I think we're one over in Tibet. I think there was one in Tibet. Maybe it's not there anymore, but this was a few decades ago. There were anthropologists there studying this, and it was really interesting because they were. Can't go deeply into that, but there was a difference between the classical patriarchy and this kind of matriarchy system, because it was more peaceful and it was more calm, and they were more sociable and they were more nurturing and everything. And I mean, the women still, of course, gave birth to the children and they were taking care of the children. The men were just like Staffage figures,
like male lions or something.
Yeah. So I think it was kind of neat, really.
What were they? I want to look into this. I really want to read up. What were they?
Was
farmers?
In Himalayas or in Tibet somewhere. I can't remember the name of the.
What did they live off of? Like, what was their mode of production?
Yeah, I think they were kind of farmers. Maybe they had yaks or something.
Cool.
Yeah, I can
see myself there.
Yeah, I can send you a link.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I mean. If we look at our societies, there has been an enormous change in the view. You reasoned differently before here, but I would argue that if you compare our societies today with 50 years ago, there's an enormous difference in what is socially acceptable and not acceptable to be or to do as a boy or a girl. So I think we can agree on that. But if you look on the labor market, it's still not 50-50, as you know. In some jobs, there is actually 50-50 almost. Or even more women than men compared to before. But in your view, in a perfectly gender equal society, would equal proportions of men and women choose to work as mechanics and with small children, respectively, you think?
Well, that's an interesting aspect. I think when you look at why Sweden, for example, has such a divided labor market, it's because so many women are employed. Did you know that? Like, if you look at Greece, for example, you have much more equality in the labor market. But what that means is that the jobs that females do here and we get paid, they do for free outside the labor market.
Yeah.
So that means that basically the classic male jobs are the ones that are being paid, whereas the classic female jobs are just, like taking care of children. Maybe you don't have a kindergarten, so you take care of your own kids at home or your grandkids or something like that. Maybe the old people you take care of for free. So I think historically, throughout the world, there has been a division of labor that entails women doing what's reproduction, what's the basis of everything, which is maintaining the human species, basically, and males doing what's like on top of that, production of something. But for production to happen, there has to be reproduction in the broader sense. Like somebody has to bring those kids up, feed them, take care of the sick, teach kids how to read and write, and all that stuff is basically in most parts of the world done by women.
Yeah.
I can imagine a world where, it's 50-50 with everything. I mean, for that to happen, we would have to go through a major process, right? I mean, it can't happen from one day to the other. But I think the most important thing right now is to like value what's traditionally called female, meaning reproductive sector, because I find it appalling that today a man that's working, for example, in banking or investment or something like that can earn so much money for that.
And a woman who works there can do that too, of course.
Yeah. But, you know, for him or her to do that, he depends on the reproductive sector to be functioning, which is functioning in a lot of countries for free, unpaid, or very low paid. So I think that's the big change. And I'm sure that when that change happens, when you're being paid, let's say in Swedish crowns, like 80,000 crowns a month to work in kindergarten, you know, I'm sure that we're going to see males, you know, flooding the place.
8,000 euros?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that is appalling. I agree. It's bizarre.
Yeah.
This salary difference there is really bizarre.
And I think also when they talk about the wage gap, like they talk about it in the wrong way, because what they talk about is, oh, women and men doing the same job get different pay. Yeah, of course. But, you know, that's not the real wage gap. The real wage gap is between reproductive labor, the
Sectors,
basic labor, and the sectors that are like parasites on that labor, because nobody can do anything unless you leave your kids in kindergarten or you leave your kids in school or, you know, your old parents are being, you know, cared for. So anybody who goes to work is depending on that already being taken care of.
So what do you think that very well-informed and well-educated young women in Sweden, Norway, Denmark, Finland, for instance, in these countries where equality is the highest, gender equality is the highest in the world probably, why don't they rush to these well-paid jobs like in banking, as you mentioned, or other kinds of jobs?
I mean, some are doing it, but I also think, you know, if they all did, we would have a big problem, because who would work in kindergartens and schools and hospitals?
Yeah,
and
but I
things
mean,
like
it's a free country. They don't have to go to these low-paid, you know.
But maybe it's really rewarding in a human sense.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would love to work in a kindergarten. I have worked in kindergartens before, and I think
so why don't young men who are
because it is
empathic and want to work with kids rush to those jobs? Because
I mean, some
rewarding.
do, but most of the time, I mean, they are very low paid, and also there's no possibility of career. I mean, basically, you earn the same thing when you're 20 and you start as when you're 65 and you quit. Whereas in most male jobs, there is a possibility of advancing. So you can actually have a career within your job. You start one place, you end up another. You don't do the same thing. And I mean, if you look at the classic female labor, it has been doing the same thing over and over again, like maintaining status quo. Like if you look at cleaning, for example, a classic historical female job, you clean, then somebody walks in with dirty feet, you clean again. You wash clothes, somebody wears them, they get dirty, you wash them again. You know, you make food, somebody eats it, you know, you have to make food again.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stick. Yeah, maintenance of everything, which is the most necessary thing, but it doesn't make it into history books, because it doesn't say, oh, she made this great meal, everybody remembered, okay? But then you add, you know, the guy who ate that meal was a general, he went out and he killed lots of people, he made it into history books.
Yeah.
So you see like that side making things that kind of stay, right? Like, oh, I built this building, right? It's still there. You can look at it. Whereas the classic female thing is something that...
I cleaned this floor.
Yeah.
But it's dirty now.
Yeah, exactly. Take a picture and then, like, you know, let's praise it forever. Tomorrow it's gone.
Yeah.
So the reward, we're just doing the same thing over and over again, and we don't get rewarded. You know, that's the
I've always
plight of
thought
females.
that cleaners and the like should have the highest wages. Actually.
I think so too, because that's the basics.
Yeah, because I mean the other jobs are rewarding in other ways.
Yeah,
you don't need money for it.
You don't. I know.
And I mean, I don't consider myself a socialist, but that thing I actually think, I actually believe.
And I also think, like, yeah, I mean, they always say, oh, but if you didn't pay that much for, like, you know, being a CEO, nobody would become. Why don't they reason that way with, like, other jobs, like cleaning?
Exactly.
If you didn't pay, like, $10,000 a month, nobody would do it.
Well, there's some kind of, I mean, this aspect of responsibility and things like that. Maybe.
But, man, I cannot imagine a higher responsibility than taking care of children or sick people.
That's true.
Because you make one mistake, they're dead.
That's true. Cleaning a floor, not so much.
Not so much, maybe. Unless, cleaning windows is very risky.
That's very risky. That's true. Okay. Excellent. We've talked for a long time. It's been wonderful. what you focus your attention on is what you attract. So if you focus on conflict and polarization, that's what you're going to get. And if you focus on understanding and compromise, that's what you're likely to get. So Kajsa, what is the best way, do you think, to make peace in this strange new gender war?
That's a good question. I think it's going to happen organically. I think with time it will happen. And I think what we're going to realize is we can't have a society where we can perfectly accommodate transgender rights without compromising the rights of women. I don't think they need to go against each other at all.
No.
You see? And I don't think there would be this conflict between the women's movement and the transgender movement. I don't see that as actually being a conflict at all.
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be, right?
So it's going to happen organically and soon, or do you think we have a few years of
I think we have
strife?
10, 15 years. Yeah. We have a lot of, understanding to do. So I think it will happen organically, as time goes on, more debate. I think especially we need more debate about this because we haven't really had debate at all. Yeah.
More books from you, perhaps?
No, I think I'm done with this topic.
Okay.
My next book is going to be about con men, so it's a totally different subject.
Interesting.
Like scammers, like Macchiarini and those people.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Different topic.
Interesting. So how far have you come with that one?
Actually, I'm not supposed to mention this because I never mention my
News.
projects. So we'll just hope that nobody has listened this far.
Sometime in the future, there's going to be a book.
Hopefully,
about this. Yeah. It's been a true pleasure talking with you today, Kajsa Ekis Ekman. And where can people find your work? I think your earlier books have been translated to English, right?
Yeah, my book about prostitution and surrogacy is in English. It's called Being and Being Bought, Prostitution, Surrogacy, and the Split Self. And also it's in Spanish, French, and German. My second book is in Greek only and Swedish. And this one, hopefully, it will be translated to English.
Yeah.
We're looking for a publisher now, so we'll see.
Excellent. And you have a website?
Yeah, but it's not really updated.
Okay.
Yeah, but I mean, you can find. I have lots of writings and speeches in English.
Yeah,
I'll put some links.
I'll put some links in the intro text to the episode. So, good luck, Kajsa, with your latest book, and hopefully it will trigger a sound and healthy debate. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.